So, part two to the conversation of how interest rates correlate to each other is very important because a lot of people tend to not understand that they have to follow parallel to each other. So, I'll use an example of you guys know what the scales of justice are, right? So, the scales of justice are that the scales that have the balance of whenever you put a weight on one side, it will obviously weigh down the other side, and then if you don't put the weight onto the opposite side, eventually it's just going to get too heavy. So if one side gets too heavy, it becomes imbalanced, right? So you will hear a lot of people who are like, well, why can't they just give me a interest rate or a dividend rate that is higher and then do lending for a smaller amount? Well, that's because when that happens, the scale ends up becoming completely imbalanced. So if the institution is consistently giving out, let's just say, a high percentage rate for your deposit accounts, but they're not making any of that back at all. Or let's say they are making that amount back for a much lower interest rate, then it becomes imbalanced to the point where you will eventually go bankrupt. And if that institution goes bankrupt, what happens next? You're just going to go on to the next institution. And then if that happens with the next institution, you end up going to an additional institution. Obviously, if you have an institution that you are very loyal to, you're going to want to stick with them. But at the same time, if that institution cannot perform as a business, then you put yourself in a situation where they're not going to serve anyone at the end of it. So that's why it's really important to understand that you do have to have a parallel relationship between deposit account interest rates and lending account interest rates. And it seems like a lot of people really kind of like don't understand that and don't question why the importance of having both sides equal out eventually. Now, depending on the institution, if they are much more heavily profit driven, then their interest rates are going to be higher for the most part for their lending rates. And then their deposit rates are going to be, I won't say substantially lower, but lower than kind of the average in the country. So I hope that helps you guys kind of explain, why some of the interest rates you see for different institutions vary so much. It really kind of depends on what their goal is. So my suggestion has always been, if you really want a company that, treats you right, try to find your local credit union, see which one works out best for you, and then, go from there.